Refreshing and stimulating talk. Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
Okay, it is a Tuesday night, which means that we bring you our health and wellness feature at around this time. This time around, we are talking about matters that would be, well, I suppose, could be mental health and could also be about, also have to do with your sexual health. So we're talking about addiction, and this time it's pornography addiction, which is appears to be a growing concern in South Africa, and it's often under-addressed due to the societal taboos and misunderstandings. Now, like any other addiction, pornography addiction involves compulsive behavior that interferes with daily life, relationships, work, and personal well-being. It's a complex condition that can lead to serious emotional, psychological, and even physical consequences if left unaddressed. Okay, so joining me this evening to have this conversation, we'll get at it from a couple of different angles. We have with us intimacy coach Ntileka Mhlauli, who's joining us on Teams. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for making time for us.
Good evening, Thabiso, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, we'll also in a moment be joined by Ntamu Muonga, who is a therapist. As soon as we have she's on the line, we will bring her in. All right, I suppose it would be a good starting point is really to... Oh, is he there? Okay, I believe he's there. I wasn't seeing him there. Okay, all right. Now that's it. Let's bring in Samuonga. Good evening.
Good evening, Chichi. How are you? And good evening to Ntileka.
No, we're very well. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, sorry, I hadn't seen you there. All right, so there we are. We are all on board. Okay, let me start with you, Samuonga, as the therapist amongst us. We know. Maybe it's important to define what an addiction is before we delve into the nature of the addiction, because while they come in different forms, but they all have certain characteristics in common.
Yeah, I think a key word here is addiction, and many times people think of addiction as an objective experience that stands alone and in itself, and let's say people talk about substance addiction or food addiction or behavior addiction. And I think thinking about it that way becomes a bit problematic, right? So what I like to talk about is addictive behaviors, right? So because then that separates the behavior from the person, and it brings in an aspect of that, the fact that people use these behaviors to manage some unresolved feelings and experiences within themselves. And so this is why, rather than speaking about addiction, I like to talk about addictive behaviors. Right now, when we're speaking about addictive behaviors and relating this to the addictive behavior of pornography, then we are speaking about somebody who uses pornography to manage some uncomfortable emotions, relational distresses, or whatever it is that distresses them by accessing or by watching pornography. So they're using pornography to manage some distressing or uncomfortable experiences within themselves, hence the addictive behavior of pornography.
Okay. So, I mean, I suppose not all behavior that becomes addictive all has, shall we say, some benign roots, in the sense that, it all starts off with just normal, in inverted commas, normal use of whatever it is, whether it be alcohol or normal of pornography. Well, in fact, the question I was going to come to is that a lot of the times when you hear about pornography, it's always in very negative terms, to talk about how destructive it is. But is there a time where you can say there is actually healthy use of pornography? Let me bring you in on that one, and especially because this is where we start to get into relationship aspects as well. Then, is there actually a healthy use of something like pornography? And I use the word healthy very guardedly here.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. So it's about context, and as Nsamu explained the behavior, it happens in a different context. It can be used in a healthy manner, in a way that if it's explored in the relationship, let's say mutually and consensually, and it's something that you have spoken about or had a communication or a conversation about it, it can be used as a way to explore desires, preferences, or even fantasies. It can be used as for inspiration, for instance, as long as both partners are aware that whatever you're watching on that platform, on those videos, is not something that obviously you are either going to reenact per se, or put pressure on each other to reenact. So from that perspective, using it for inspiration, using it to find new ideas and explore, it can be used. That can be a healthy way to engage and indulge in content.
But now the difficulty with this is that, as you say, if it's used within the context of a relationship where it's all open and both partners are aware of how the other is using it, the difficulty is that I suppose when it comes to what Nsamu Monga describes there as prefers to call addictive behaviors, and people tend to do these things in secret. That a lot of times people who are dealing with addictions of sorts, they're doing it in the dark where people don't even know until it's actually, blows up. There's some explosion, that puts it out in the open. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's what you indicate.
Thank you. So yes, they do. Simply by virtue of the sexual topic and pornography is still quite taboo. And I mean, in South Africa, we don't talk about sex, let alone pornography. So when you do talk about porn, it people still have a sense of guilt and shame around it. So when it does become compulsive sexual behavior, meaning you're now obsessing and you're addicted to it, the person who's doing it or watching and consuming the adult content is aware that it is a problem, and therefore that's why they would hide it and not talk about it, not share or tell someone that, hey, I have this kind of problem, because now you're admitting and you're putting yourself in a position where you might get judged, you might get shamed for it, you'll get labeled, etc. By virtue of that, people don't talk about it.
Yeah.
However, also in relationships in general, people don't have conversations about sex and their desires and their fantasies. So that's why people would then engage and indulge in pornography and not tell their partners that they are watching, because there's people who watch it but hide it from their partner, even though they're not addicted to it.
Coming back to you, in some Monga, where in terms of like the use or healthy use, in inverted commas, of this porn, is it, the thing is, again, as I was saying, porn has a bad rap, if you get what I'm saying, because a lot of it is viewed in a very negative light, because of the fact that people can get addicted to it and all of that. It has all kinds of damaging effect on people's mental health or even physical health. So much so that I don't ever think that, and I think maybe perhaps what helps is the way that Ntileka describes it as adult content, because if you talk about adult content, it just takes away, that pornography, even the word itself, has some kind of connotations that it conjures up in our, or images that it conjures up in our mind. But I do wonder then, is that even the language around pornography is not helpful, especially in trying to confront people that are dealing with a problem behavior or the addictive behavior?
Yeah, I think like all things, the thing itself is not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The thing itself is not a problem. It is what it is functioning as in an individual. So this is where I was talking about. I was making a distinction between just the use of the word addiction as if it's addiction is a noun,
Yeah,
and it stands on its own, and yet one has to think about it as what is it in service to within an individual. So pornography, adult content, any of that stuff is not in itself a problem. One has to ask the question, what is it serving in an individual? What is its function in an individual? And that's where we begin to see what the underlying motivators for somebody using adult content or pornography, right? It's because some people might be using porn as a form of managing, like I said, managing some uncomfortable emotions that they have not been able to confront within themselves, or they're using porn to manage some form of relational anxieties, or they don't know how to manage relationships without think of somebody who uses alcohol as an example, or as a way of engaging in a relationship. Somebody who cannot enter a relationship without the use of a particular substance. So they use this substance to almost like a way of numbing their own anxiety so that they can engage. And so for me, the question is, what is this pornography doing? What is its function in this particular person who is using it? What is it doing while they're using it? What is it doing while they are thinking about using it? Right? I think of somebody who is using alcohol again. One would have to ask, what is the function of this alcohol now? Am I thinking about the alcohol all the time for my function? Am I the kind of person who has to have alcohol before I go to meet people? Am I the kind of person who has to have this alcohol before I go into a meeting, before I go and perform? So now one begins to think about that dependence, right? Now we're now using words like dependence in that sense. So am I depending on pornography for me to stimulate whatever it is that has to be stimulated in that context? Am I dependent on this pornography for me to find some energy for whatever it is? So now we're talking about dependency, we're talking about use of pornography, and then we can begin to talk about the unhealthy or unhelpful dependency on this when it becomes compulsive. By compulsive, then we are talking about almost like the loss of control of when I use it or when I access it. Then we get into a situation where people cannot control their own access to these. They become compulsive users. They hunt for it. Think of a person who is addicted to nyaope. They are willing to go to any extent to have access to that nyaope. Right? Somebody is at work, somebody is in front of a desk at work, but they're watching porn. Right. Or they're looking for the next opportunity when they can have access to porn. At that stage, it no longer functions to create relationships. It becomes an end in itself. Somebody who's addicted to alcohol starts using alcohol as an end in itself. It's no longer in function to numbing those particular nerves.
You know, there's a context in terms of when the use of pornography and those kind of things that are supposed to be things that are used in open relationships in Dileka. And I do wonder, though, that is can be one of those things that is a preference thing, where one partner may feel like, wow, that's not really my thing, and the other partner gets, finds it appealing or that type of thing. And these compromises that exist, I mean, they are very tricky to draw these compromises, especially where people who are one who's not into it, the particular thing. Let's talk about porn here. I mean, in that then it becomes more difficult for them to see a middle ground, to say that, actually this can be normal up to a point, or can be healthy or acceptable up to a point.
Yeah. I think, as we've discussed up to this point so far, we've discovered that porn has a bad rap, but also there's not much, I think, education around consuming adult content and how you can use it in a healthy way. And the reason why porn has a bad rap is because, when it blows up, we only hear about these addictive stories and behavior stories around it. But when people are consuming it in moderation, in a healthy way, we don't talk about it. So I think, a lot of couples are faced with, those kind of challenges where one is interested, the other's not. And it could be due to a number of reasons. Either they're uncomfortable, either they haven't, experienced that kind of content, or there's shame around it, there's guilt around it. And also they don't know how to navigate the conversation. So in most cases, in couples where they find themselves, the other one suggesting something, the reason again we should be looking at is, why are people using porn? Why am I consuming porn? Why do I want to bring this content into my relationship? Is it to better the relationship? Is it to explore the desires? Is it to maybe help me tell my partner about my desires? Or, we're feeling like we're in a rut and we need some sort of spicing things up. There's always a reason, as Nsamu has mentioned, why people consume adult content. So there's always a basis of, if you bring something to the table, and porn being one of them, explain to your partner, or have a reason, a valid reason, a good reason to motivate the use of porn and how it can help your relationship. Also, just speaking about, the healthy use of porn, there's now ethical sites, websites that are available, that are trying to shift the conversation or the perception of pornography. And those videos are made and produced in such a way that they depict real life intimacy. They they show real pleasures that people have. So when people are watching those, they can relate it to their own personal lives and real life experiences. Unlike, the content that, people just normally watch and is free and available on their phones, that have creates performance anxiety or pressure in relationships, or even make people have unrealistic expectations of what they see and what they view sex to be in comparison to real relationships. So there is a conversation happening. We're just not having it, and obviously people are not, navigating properly. But the healthy consumption of porn is in moderation, and also positive reasons why you would consume porn.
And from a therapy point of view, and Samumonga, what is the approach when you're dealing with an addictive behavior, but that is, with someone who's addicted to pornography? I mean, do you treat it like any other addiction? And in fact, when maybe I should ask even the question whether people who are, there are people who are predisposed to addictions, no matter of what sort, and that would include pornography as well.
Yeah, I think I keep coming back to the idea of what is it in service to? What is it? What is this? Its function in this particular context, and clarifying that does help to begin to think about: is it necessary? Are there options? Are there other things that we can introduce? Are there other things that I can use as opposed to this one thing? Have I still got control over whether I use this or not? So that's usually in addiction, in addiction work. That's the work. That's where the work begins. We have to explore what this is functioning as, and then we have to look at what options might be in place, might be available for that person, instead of using this thing. And then we also have to look at the effects. What effects has this thing, what effect has porn got on your individual life? What effect has the use of pornography got in your relationships? What effect has it got in your daily life? And do you want these effects to continue in this particular manner? Am I accountable, therefore, for the effects and the effects of my use of pornography? Am I accountable for those particular effects in my relationships, in my work, in my living life, in my working hours, in my thinking, in my feeling? Because the use of pornography is going to have an effect on all those levels: the feeling level, the thinking level, relational level. So am I accountable for all of this? And are there options? Are there other options that are available to me as an individual, that can take the place of that? So it's a question of its function. What other options can I have? Think about alcohol again as an example, right? Yes, I can drink alcohol, but what other options? What is it? What is its function? Somebody would say, well, I'm drinking because I'm thirsty, right? Okay, what other thing can I drink if I have a problematic relationship with my use of alcohol? Do I continue, therefore, drinking the alcohol? If it's affecting my relationships, do I continue using alcohol? Or can I explore other options that might be available? Is it water, or is it Coke Zero? Is it alcohol-free beer, or whatever other options that might be available that can help me sustain the life that I want to live, and also be accountable to the effect of that substance, the effect of my use of pornography in my life and in my relationships.
That is Nsamu Monga, who is a therapist, and also with us is Ndilega Mhlauli, who is an intimacy coach. We are talking about pornography and its effects on your relationships, and also on sexual health. We will continue our conversation and invite you as well to be a part of the conversation on 0861987000.
Power Perspective, 8 p.m. to midnight.
Talking about pornography and its effects and impact on sexual health and on just in relationships in general. My guest tonight, a therapist Nsamu Monga, and Ndilega Mhlauli, who is a intimacy coach. Now, I would imagine that, as with other addictive behavior, the impact on relationships is the same. And I do wonder, though, whether the approach to dealing with it has to be different given the nature of the subject matter, in the sense that, people who are addicted to porn, I don't think generally do it in a public platform or space, so they probably consume it when they're alone. And whereas, drinkers, someone who's a problem drinker does it in public and can be seen in public. Yes, sometimes they also indulge on their own, but it's a very public thing. So, and I wonder, as a result of that, does that necessarily force a different approach in Dilega? In terms of how you deal with something like that? Because, as you said, it's still a matter, a bit of a taboo subject.
So not necessarily. I mean, the only thing that's different would be people wouldn't know about it. But obviously, helping a couple or helping someone who is struggling with addiction, the process is the same. And you obviously your approach is to deal with the root cause, as in Samu mentioned earlier, that what is the reason for the use or the use of the thing, and then from there you then help the couple rebuild the relationship in terms of trust, in terms of being vulnerable, in terms of helping them rebuild where it was broken, because the impact of the partner finding out that their partner has this behavior can be quite traumatic for the partner who finds out. There's lots of emotions that the partner can experience, from shock to anger to sadness to depression, to feelings of being inadequate and not enough, and sometimes even blaming themselves for the partner's addiction or sexual compulsive behaviors, depending on the extent of the addiction and what level the person who's consuming this adult porn, because sometimes it can be more than just watching it. It can push them to the levels where they are seeking sexual activity and satisfaction, and to the point of they having affairs, and they're seeking they're going out to seek sex workers to help them feel stimulated and feed this thing that they are fighting against or don't have control of their sexual urges. So rebuilding is holistic, and you have to approach it from different layers and looking at the partners both individually, from the addiction point of view, and how the other partner was affected, and then helping them rebuild trust and rebuild the relationship from the broken and how the broken perspective and how it impacted their relationship.
And in some if we are looking at how we begin to address addiction, with most forms of addiction, especially to substance and all of that, the intervention there is completely eliminating any use of that substance, whether it be alcohol or some other drug. You can't say you're weaning someone off it, or that it's okay for you to have just a little bit of alcohol once in a while. It's when you're dealing with somebody who's got an addictive problem here. So would the same apply to porn here, even though we maintain that there is such a thing as a healthy amount or healthy use of porn?
Yeah, I think the same thing happens. One has to think about the idea of the 12-step. The first step in the 12-step approach is acknowledging that I have a problem. So that's the beginning point. Acknowledging that I have a problem, and this problem is causing several other problems in my life, in relationships. And secondly, it's admitting that I have no control over this particular behavior. Because part of the addiction is to begin to believe that I am in control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How many people believe that they are better drivers under the influence of alcohol? Because there's almost a bias towards ourselves, that this competence bias, that I am in control, even when all the signs outside of myself are screaming, that I am not in control.
Yeah.
Right? So part of part of healing requires admitting that I'm not in control of the circumstances. I'm not in control of this particular behavior. I'm not in control of my use of pornography. And then we go on to the other steps, like Ndleka mentioned. One of the steps is repair, acknowledging the damage and the harm that my addictive behavior has caused in my relationships, and going forward to actually make amends, right? And there's wisdom in thinking about total abstinence from a behavior that is addictive, because going back to that behavior, that's part of the reason the word, whether it's backsliding or there are so many words that are used for that kind of thing, is that one single use can send somebody many steps behind. There's grace, there's forgiveness that has to happen, but then you build up relationships that are very supportive of a new way or a different way one wants to live their life. So in a way, one has to constantly be vigilant, right? So we say that the price of freedom, or the price of a healthy life, is eternal vigilance, right? So going back or playing around with the potentially addictive behavior is not usually a good way to do recovery work.
No, absolutely. We are on 0861 987 000, WhatsApp 0833037093, and on X at Thabiso Tema or at Power FM 987. Use the hashtag Power Perspective if you want to join the conversation. So, Ndleka, I do wonder though, what the level of, I have not yet come across a Porn Anonymous, or I know there's a Gamblers Anonymous and you've got Alcoholics Anonymous. So, and the reason why I'm asking is I wonder what the levels of acceptance do people actually own up to porn addiction and then seek the necessary help.
Yeah, there isn't, because, like you said, it becomes a problem if once they are found out or they're caught. There's not a lot of cases where people do admit it and actually go and seek help. Everyone feels like, no, I'm in control, or I'm having a slip up, I can do this, or they stop for a period and then they go back again, and etc. And again, the word addiction is a bit confusing for a lot of people. I get asked a lot, what like, how do you know you're addicted to porn? Because they want specific signs, and addiction in their head looks a certain way. It looks like a person who's addicted to drugs and an alcoholic who can't function. But if with porn, I can hide it. I can do it in the bathroom, at work. I can do it, I hide it from my relationship. So there's a sense of I'm in control that people feel, and they don't see it as a problem. And that's why even in conversations around sexual health, the common question is, how do you know it's a problem? So the addiction part is kind of confusing to people. And then in terms of just dealing with it and having an anonymous place to kind of seek help. I don't think there's also places for that. For one, therapy is seen as something you go to when you have a problem. So firstly, you have to accept that you do have a problem and it's affecting your life in a certain way. A lot of people are in denial, and there's a lot of shame around this kind of addiction, and therefore they will do everything and anything in their power to hide it. And that's why you've seen cases where gone out in the media, maybe with celebrities and stuff, there is a lot of shame that they get. There's a lot of judgment that they get. So when a person has this kind of addiction, they look at that, and that's like it's a fear for them. So they will do everything and anything to hide it. And even when they're dealing with it, let's say it comes out, and they maybe probably go to therapy with their partner, it's usually something they hide. They're in therapy, but they wouldn't tell people why.
Yeah, of course, because of that. And is that in itself problematic at all? And some, or is it just one of those things that you have to be treated with a level of discretion?
I think the social cultural issues here need to be to be raised as well. As Ndileka mentioned, the shaming, even ideas around, for some people it's religion. Religious issues come up, and religious ideas around sex, religious ideas around pornography, they all come into this whole thing, right? And I think you were onto something there when you were talking about the difference between other forms of addiction and also seeking help, the help seeking behaviors around them, because some addictive behaviors have come to be socially known, admitted, accepted, and they've become part of our social conversations. People are able to name alcohol addiction, for example, or food addiction, or now people are able to name sex addiction. Right? So there's almost an acceptance that these are issues that we are okay to deal with. I think that when it comes to porn addiction, the levels there are still quite difficult to deal with because of the secrecy and the shame, and as Ndileka said, this whole thing of how do you know somebody's addicted to porn if you don't catch them, if they're not caught, right? And it kind of only becomes a problem then because there's no evidence. There's no evidence that somebody is caught on the outside. I mean, there's no evidence that somebody is struggling with porn on the outside until they are caught.
Maybe maybe in the 10 minutes that we have remaining, let's get into actually why porn addiction can be so problematic in a relationship. Especially if it's apparently a victimless pursuit.
Can be a problem because it can actually break down the relationship, the bond that you've created in the relationship. It breaks down trust, for instance, the dishonesty, that there's a level of deception that goes on when you have this kind of addiction, because you have to hide it. So the secrecy and once your partner finds out, there's a level of betrayal they also feel, also the sexual inadequacy that your partner might feel. They may blame themselves, as I mentioned before. They may feel like they don't satisfy you. They may feel like they're not enough for you. They may feel like they're doing something wrong, or you actually don't enjoy having sexual intimacy with them. Also, once someone has this compulsive behavior, most times they end up not even wanting to be intimate with their partners. So there's normally then sex, but over time as well, it affects their sexual performance in the bedroom. They might have issues with erection. They might have issues with attaining an orgasm, and they may also have issues with just performance in general, or even feeling aroused, because their mind is now used to a certain kind of stimulation. They have to watch the video first in order for arousal to happen, and when that is not there, they can't get to that level by themselves. Also, I think another thing that can happen in an intimate relationship is, I think I've mentioned just kind of all the things that could go wrong once this secret comes out in the
Okay.
relationship. I think the biggest thing is the trust and betrayal component that happens, that actually breaks down the relationship.
And which is
And
almost
I think
impossible
I
to measure. Yeah, please go ahead, Nsamu, please go ahead.
And also, because of psychological issues underlying all of that is also the inadequacy to sustain intimacy. Like not even just sexual intimacy, but just intimacy in a relationship. Because of all these overpowering underlying emotions, the person is incapable of being with another person, or even being with another person in a non-sexual way. So imagine that in a relationship. It doesn't all have to be, because if I'm feeling terribly inadequate, if I cannot sustain, if I cannot be with my own feelings and emotions, if I cannot sustain my own personal intimacy, it becomes extremely difficult to sustain an interrelational intimacy. The person then struggles to do that. So these are the kinds of people that you find that they cannot even sit with another person for a sustained period of time. A person is, like I said earlier, a person is looking, the porn is used as almost like a stimulant. So they're looking for every opportunity to stimulate themselves. So being with another person causes so much anxiety. Being in a relationship can be anxiety provoking. So some people might find that they're more compelled to use porn in those circumstances. So that also is a question when we're working with a person who is having to deal with porn, is when do you use it? When do you tend to use it more? Right? What are the patterns here? When do you think about it less? How much time does it take you to plan this? How much time do you use to do this? Uh, where and when? So we have to ask all these questions around to actually begin to
Yes.
figure out what is going on.
I can see how that can be a very awkward conversation. Having to answer the way in the planning. The idea that one plans this addiction. Yeah, and I think I guess the shame that goes with addiction of all sorts, and it's not just the porn addiction that that I think we talk about. With any of these kind of things, I suppose there's strength. It's always the better approach and a more sustainable approach is if both parties to a relationship, if it is it happens to be in people who are married or in an intimate relationship and all of that these things tend to be more effective when you go and seek help as a couple. I do wonder though what happens in the case of someone who's not in a relationship with an adult relationship, as in a romantic relationship, is what I'm trying to say. But they still have this problem, and that is affecting, I don't know how else it could be affecting their lives, You can go with that one, Dilega, if you like. Yeah, I'll let you have a bite at it as well, and Samu.
Yeah. So, even if you're not in relation, every now and then, let's say you are using pornography either to stimulate yourself and maybe get sexual release. Every now and then, you probably be in relation with someone and be in an intimate setting with someone. So there are also signs that can show you that it is a problem, because it will affect you physically in the longer term. It's almost as if you're training your brain to be stimulated in a certain way. Therefore, when you are in a real life setup or situation, then it becomes hard. Now your brain is now used to a certain kind of, I have to watch a certain kind of video. It even goes down to people having specific categories that they have to watch in order to get the stimulation that they're looking for. So physically, it does affect your sexual health, your sexual response, that obviously we all naturally have. So that's an easy sign, and from a physical perspective, from a psychological perspective, it can blockages for you to and prevent you from actually having natural stimulation and full arousal, and also have erections, etc.
So indeed here we are also talking about this, a serious detrimental impact on mental health here in some.
Yes, and general human function, right? Think of a person who is dependent on pornography, and it affects their function, their work, right? Somebody, like I said earlier, somebody sitting on the desk and they're thinking about when next they're going to take a bathroom break so that they can sneak in a 5 minutes pornography thing, right? This meeting is too stressful. It's taking too long, and I need a little break, right? I need a smoke break. So. And you've got deadlines, right? So the function, just the performance in general gets affected. How I am with people, right? If I'm working in a team, I can't sustain an hour's team meeting because I need a smoke break. I need a porn break. I think that's even a thing that we have to be talking about. We talk about smoke breaks and tea breaks. Maybe on teams there are people who do take porn breaks.
I think let us rescue this conversation before it goes in a direction that we can't pull it back from. But I want to thank you both so much. And Samu, it's Abu Munga, who is a therapist. Thank you so much for your input and your insight. I really appreciate it. And also Ndileka Mhlauli, an intimacy coach. Thank you so much, Coach.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good evening.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.